Welcome, everybody. My name is Sabrina from the Eating Disorder Foundation in Denver, Colorado. I'm the program director, and I am here to welcome and help moderate this evening's workshop, Happier Holidays. Please note that we'll be using the chat feature to communicate if there's any questions or comments, resources that you'd like. You can always chat me directly. Thank you so much. And so tonight's workshop is brought to you in collaboration with the Eating Disorder Foundation and EQUIP. And so I'd love to share a little bit about EDF and then introduce a representative from EQUIP to do the same. The Eating Disorder Foundation is a free non-clinical resource in Denver, Colorado. We're really lucky now and fortunate to be offering all of our services virtually through support, advocacy, and education. I want to take a moment and really thank everybody who was able to provide a donation towards this evening's workshop. It's really greatly appreciated and how we're able to do our work free of cost. And I will make sure that the website and the email towards the Eating Disorder Foundation is put in the chat in a few moments, so that if you have any questions or you'd like to sign up for a newsletter, that you'll be able to do that. And now I'd like to invite Jessica from EQUIP to introduce herself and share a little bit about their services.
Hi, I am Jessica Hickman. I'm the Community Partnership Senior Manager at EQUIP. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. Just a little bit about EQUIP. We were founded in 2019 with a pretty bold mission of making gold standard eating disorder care accessible to everyone who needs it. And we do that by delivering family-based treatment at home. You might have caught our last workshop with EDF about, how we've built upon FBT, which we've done by providing families with a dedicated 5-person care team that includes a therapist, dietitian, physician, and a peer and family mentor. And actually, you have 2 of our finest peer and family mentors here with us today who will be presenting. And something that's just really special about our program that I think really appeals to this audience is not only was EQUIP created by experts in the field, including leading researchers and clinicians, but it's also been created by people who've personally navigated eating disorder recovery. And we'd love to stay in touch. And if you're interested in learning more about our program, or if you think it's the right fit for you or a patient, you're welcome to email me directly at jessica@equip.health, or you can visit our website at equip.health. I'll put both of those in the chat in just a bit.
Thank you so much, Jessica. We're really excited to collaborate and support each other's efforts in this field. So now I'm really excited to introduce our speakers for this evening. First, we have JD Ouellette, the Director of Mentorship at EQUIP. She is an educator turned family mentor whose youngest child developed anorexia in 2012. They received cutting-edge evidence-based treatment at UC San Diego, which ignited JD's passion to ensure that all families have access to evidence-based care. JD is active in online family support communities, writing, and speaking at conferences. She's also a past board member of Feast, which is another organization towards family and friends. Just incredible. We also have with us Maris DeGenner. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Correct me if I'm wrong again, Maris. Maris is the peer mentorship manager at EQUIP, where she currently oversees all peer mentors. After recovering from anorexia as a teenager, Maris became passionate about harnessing her lived experience to support others suffering from eating disorders. Maris shared her story in the documentary I Am Maris, which is available on Netflix, to spread the message that full recovery is possible and destigmatize talking openly about mental health challenges. Maris studied psychology at UC Santa Cruz. Thank you all again so much for being here. One final reminder to utilize the chat with questions. And now I'll happily mute myself and pass over to our speakers.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Sabrina. And we're so excited to be here today to talk about having happier holidays during this really trying time. So we want to give you the wisdom of our lived experience and the lived experience of others and how we can better navigate recovery during the holiday season.
And yeah, thank you so much for that intro, Sabrina. And my last name is hard to say, so I think I might go the route of Beyonce or Zendaya one day and just like get rid of it altogether. So no worries. I want to walk us through the agenda just briefly today. So we're going to give you some introductions to who we are. We're going to walk you through some decision trees on how to decide what plan or approach you want to take this year for your family. We're going to talk through some strategies for how you might participate more similar to what a normative year might look like for your family. And then we're also going to talk about some strategies for what this all might look like later in recovery, later down the line. And then we'll close with some closing thoughts and we'll leave some time for Q&A at the end. Go on to the next slide. And while I'm still talking, I'll just briefly introduce myself. Sabrina, you gave me a great intro, but I just do like to share that when I was diagnosed, my family didn't know all too much about eating disorders at all. And we were really lucky to get introduced to family-based treatment. So my parents really played a leading role in spearheading my recovery. So a lot of what we'll be talking about today from my perspective will be kind of how my family approached holidays and the things that I think went really well for us, and also the things that hindsight's 2020 I might do differently the next time. JD, do you want to give us an intro to you?
Thank you. So I am JD, Director of Mentorship at Equip, and just sort of a little brief summary of our journey is that when my daughter was 17, she went on a healthy eating makeover with her friends. It was a very quick decline. As Sabrina said, we're very lucky to get really good care at UC San Diego almost immediately. And that, of course, as people know, makes all the difference. So it was still a very, very long, hard journey. And I kind of never left multifamily format support and continued to provide that in a variety of ways, and left my career in education in 2018 to begin to do this work full time. So I'm really excited to be with Equip and to work with Maris and to be sharing these ideas with you here today.
And so we're going to talk a little bit about, how we're just going to make these decisions about what a recovery supportive holiday plan might look like this year for your family. If you want to go to the next slide, Jess. We think a really important first step is really just to do a gut check, really to trust your intuition and get curious about when you think about this year's holiday season, what reaction comes up for you. And we think there could be some, different options that come up for you, but for the purposes of this presentation, we'll break it up into about 3 different areas. So your gut might say, hey, maybe we want to just try to participate as would be normal for our family this year. Your gut might say, we should just skip this altogether. Or your gut might say, maybe there's a way to adapt this so it doesn't look quite like years past, but we could still make some things work for our family.
And as we talk about your holiday decision tree for whatever holidays it is that are important to your family during this time of year, I want to sort of allude to dialectical behavior therapy skills. Could we advance that slide, Sabrina? Thanks. Dialectical behavior therapy skills are something that we do a lot of at Equip. It was something that I certainly had a lot of at UC San Diego. And it really invites us into really sitting down and thinking about decisions and acting rather than reacting. So as Mara said, the first thing you're going to do is kind of check with your gut. If the idea of going to a holiday celebration just seems like untenable to you and like it's not going to work, that's a sign that you should listen to. If your gut says, maybe we can push it, you should listen to that as well. I really want to empower you as you make this decision that if your gut says skip it, skip it. That is a totally okay decision. And then you just to think, who do we notify, right? When do we tell them? What are our alternate plans going to be? And really remember, this is for now and not forever. And I'll just share that, our first year of holidays, that was our choice. We did choose to skip it. And I have no regrets about that decision. And in many ways, it made us able to go on to have a lot better holidays the following year.
If you want to go on, there we go. There is another middle path here, which is to adapt your participation. So something in your gut is saying, I think we're ready to start moving back towards what's more normal for our family. You don't have to go all the way right away. So often, as JD was saying, we'll refer to some DBT skills, and one way is to walk the middle path. So rather than relying on black and white or all or nothing thinking, maybe thinking about what feels accessible for this year and not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Some options that people might consider are choosing fewer food-focused events, and we can talk about some of those ideas later in the presentation. We can talk about participating in non-food focused activities or traditions that are really relevant for your family. And of course, even walking further down the middle path, we could try to adapt some of those food-focused gatherings to be a better fit for where you are right now. What's going to be important for this, and probably important for most paths as well, is to really set and communicate boundaries with those you'll be spending the holiday with. And in a few slides, we'll talk about some of those strategies. We're also going to talk about some exit strategies. So as you consider walking the middle path, you might get data right in the moment that maybe this isn't quite right for this year. And so you're going to want to have some ways ready to maybe politely step out, take a break, or choose the exit that works for your family. So I'm going to move to the next slide.
And if your gut check says, hey, I think we should participate as normal, I really want you to invite you to consider sort of what does normal mean. And I think that sometimes as people and as family members, we kind of don't want to rock the boat sometimes, and we kind of will walk on eggshells to make it seem like everything's okay. So I encourage you to really think about what normal means in all of that. And so not sort of try and do all the normal stuff, but without the eating piece of it, or without the eating in front of other people. So sort of not fall into traps of redefining normal to include eating disorder accommodation. So next slide.
And so if your gut is saying normal feels good for this year, I think a really great step one is getting super clear on what your intentions or goals are for participating. Is number one spending time with friends and family? Is number one actually challenging some challenge foods? Like those are going to look really, really different. So it'd be really helpful to spend some time talking to your loved ones, talking to your treatment team to get clear on what you're hoping to get out of this year's holiday. Right along those lines, this is a really great conversation to have with your treatment team. Maybe go through some pros and cons, maybe talk through and cope ahead for some scenarios that might arise. It can be really helpful to cope ahead by thinking through, are there family members that might bring up some challenging conversation topics? Is there a food that might arrive on the table that you think could present as particularly challenging? Those are things that we don't have to wait to be in the moment for to address. We can actually plan some skills and practical strategies for navigating ahead of time. It's also a good idea to have some conversations in advance. So if you're going to be spending this holiday with others, it's really helpful to loop them in and to talk clearly about what you might need from them or what might look different this year, just so that everybody's on the same page. I also think it's helpful to be prepared to pivot. And so you never know what might arise day of, hours before, or during that event, but to have some flexibility prepared, or to be prepared to be flexible, because pivoting might happen and that's totally okay. I think something else I'd like to plant as a seed is there might be the possibility that some folks out there are feeling really ready to actively challenge the eating disorder. Maybe you're feeling excited about conquering some challenge foods. Maybe you're feeling exciting about challenging the things the eating disorder has made more difficult. So that's an option as well, and that could be an exciting thing to consider. You can move to the next slide.
And one thing that we really are at Equip is driven by the data. So we're constantly looking at what the data says to inform our decisions. So I think it's really important to do that as a family too. Get very real with yourself. What does the data say about what you or your family need this year? And so some of the questions you want to ask yourself, are we meeting recovery goals? If we're not meeting recovery goals in non-holiday times, it's probably unlikely that we're going to be able to meet them during the even more stressful holiday events. Can we afford a hiccup? And that means a lot of things. Physically, is it possible to afford a hiccup? And it also means if you've been working really hard at this and you've made progress, how is that going to feel if you do have a hiccup and you have some backsliding? So thinking about all of this. So where you are in the process is a really important piece of the data and of figuring out where you are. And a lot of families who will reflect upon this, as Maris very eloquently said, you know, we all do what we do, and then hindsight gives us some more insight into what we might have done differently. I know a lot of families who sort of white knuckled it through, and then at the end of it said, gosh, those people that were telling me that maybe I should just not do all this year, turns out they were right. And also sometimes it'll be, yeah, the challenge was great and we lived up to it. So as Maris says, a lot of this is living in the gray a little bit more than most of us like to. Next slide, please.
And so now we want to spend a little bit of time talking about, you know, what are some strategies for adapting your participation this year if you're looking to walk the middle path. If you want to move to the next slide, I'll hand it off to JD to start that conversation.
Yeah, so I have a saying I used to use when I was in education, and it's really relevant here as well. Failing to plan is planning to fail. So that's true in a lot of things in life. And so we really want to do some prep work. You're going to do the prep work of really evaluating where you are. And part of that can be make a list of all the stuff you do, right? And some of us, I think this year is a little bit different, these years around COVID, right? Because most of us, it's all being reimagined anyway in terms of usual commitments. But I know my family back in the day with band concerts and parties and things like that, it could be a very, very lengthy list. So in walking the middle path, we can maybe make that list and we can cull the list. And together as a family, we can decide what are the things that are really meaningful for us this season and what are the things we just sort of do. So give yourself permission to do that. Walk the middle path. Really consult with your treatment team and also your support circle, whoever that may be, whoever's involved in supporting you. So your treatment team, and particularly EQUIP, is not going to tell you what to do. That's not the business we're in. We're in the business of partnering together to find collaborative solutions that are authentic to your life and your family. So ask people's thoughts and opinions, weigh the odds, all of that sort of thing. And consider the needs of siblings and other family members. And doing that may illuminate, you know, potentially some ways of maybe we don't all do exactly the same things for this year. And again, as you do this, don't think about this as the way it is going forward. It's the way it is this year. And that's pretty freeing to have that attitude. So next slide, if you would.
And JD, I think you touched on this really well, that a big part of this will be communication. And so one step will be talking to your support system and talking to your clinical team or your treatment team. And like JD was saying, you know, it doesn't mean that they're going to necessarily present information that makes you completely change your mind, but it might be helpful to go into it with some open-mindedness, that maybe some other perspectives can show you what you haven't quite thought through yet, or what you should plan ahead for. So that can be a really helpful first step. And then once you do come to a decision about what the plan looks like for this year, it's really helpful to try and make that decision in what we call wise mind. So taking into account what we logically know and what's emotionally true, and then communicating that to who needs to know as a final decision. And the reason I say this is sometimes when we present things as something that's up for debate or something we're still questioning, that can open up the door to a lot of opinions. So once you have a final decision that you've made with your support system, your treatment team, your family, I think it's really helpful to present that as a final decision to those you'll be spending time with. I think that goes right into setting boundaries as needed. So being really clear on what your family's needs are this year. This might look different depending on where you're at in your experience, but I think it can be helpful, for example, to set boundaries about what topics are on or off the table this year. So maybe as you do that, you could also present some alternate suggestions. So not only avoiding things like diet talk, but hey, actually, it would be really helpful if you asked so-and-so about the art project they're working on right now, or about this really cool theater project they're involved in. So as much as we set boundaries and clear limitations, I think we can provide ideas as well. It's also helpful to prepare what you're going to say and what info you want to share with family and friends. So some people are really open about this. Some people want to talk about, hey, this is an eating disorder we're experiencing. And then other people might want to share a bit more vaguely, we're navigating a health issue, we're navigating some medical needs. So think it would be really helpful to talk within your family to decide what level of information you're comfortable disclosing. And then once you do that, really helpful to decide a communication medium. We called out here a Dear Man letter, which is a specific DBT approach to writing a letter. But any kind of letter could be an option. You could write an email, you could send a text, anything that you feel comfortable utilizing. And then finally, we think it's helpful to have a point person to run interference. So if they notice an uncomfortable conversation topic has come up, or they notice something is happening that's overwhelming, it can be someone who can politely step in, create some kind of polite distraction, and really help you so that you're sharing the load of responsibility at the holiday. Can move to the next slide. And so we also want to talk about just some fun ideas. So if your family typically engaged in some movement-focused activities, like for example, a turkey trot run, you might consider some other ways to stay involved. Maybe you volunteer to set up, or maybe you make some signs and cheerlead others. You might join events before or after meals just to socialize. So pop in to say hello, maybe join for the gift exchange or whatever is happening, but maybe not sit down for the meal with everyone if that doesn't feel like a fit for this year. You might try on some new ideas, maybe some crafts or other hobbies. And you might try making some new traditions that aren't food or movement focused. So maybe if your family likes to decorate cookies for the holidays you celebrate, maybe you try decorating things like ornaments or cards, or making some other fun decorations for around the house. And then one that I know my family really enjoys is looking for some volunteering opportunities. Looking for ways to give back to your community can be a really great way to spend the day.
And, particularly in those earlier stages when you might not be up for a lot of movement and going around various things, think of some of your favorite restful activities and put a holiday spin on those. So movie nights, board games, that sort of thing. One thing that all of us at the mentor team end up talking a lot about in terms of coping skills, mindfulness, which is again from DBT. Mindfulness walks, time in nature can be a little bit of a change of pace that's really helpful. Visiting festive displays is something that my family really enjoys, and very often that can be sort of a driving thing. And then, attend the religious or culturally meaningful gatherings or ceremonies that resonate with your family. And again, you can do those around the food pieces of this. And sometimes it's a really cool thing to do, just learn more about the history and the lineage of the cultural traditions that you're celebrating in your family. So figuring out ways to do all of this that's not focused on food and movement and bring some new spin on how you celebrate can be really helpful. Next slide, please. So exit strategies. So this, I think, is a really invaluable skill, and it really enables your family to be sort of a team in all this. You're all supporting each other, you're all working together, and you're talking about this in advance. Creating a family signal is really great. Some sort of SOS 911 that your loved one with an eating disorder can give you that says, I need some help. And so, there's a lot of situations where it's really helpful to have a person without an eating disorder to step in to cut off the compensatory exit talk about, what you're going to do the day after the Thanksgiving dinner, talking about appearance, all of those sorts of things that we know are really highly triggering. And it's really an interesting thing. Once you do this, you actually begin to realize that you'd prefer all your gatherings to have a lot less of that kind of thing. So it can create really powerful shifts in family culture. Definitely prepare a backup plan. Sometimes that, depending on where you are in the process, can mean that you maybe are bringing some separate food and you have a different place to eat, that sort of thing. Again, a way to leave. Maybe someone said, maybe we know that mom is going to say, gets the signal and says, I have a headache, or we've got to go now, that sort of thing. So really teaching your loved one that they can count on you to really be on their team and help support them and get through it. And then don't snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. So, if you've had a good run, it's very much a lot of times like sort of if you had toddlers at any time, sort of remembering those years where oftentimes right after it's going great is where the crash happens. So maybe exit while it's going great and leave on those terms. And then really helpful to prepare some broken record lines for boundary setting. So again, harkening back to those so valuable DBT skills, it can be something as simple as, I know you'd like for us to stay longer and we need to leave now. And having everybody in the family know that that's the verbiage you're using, or, we've loved being here with you today and we've got somewhere else to be. Whatever it is, you can prepare those lines in advance and you can practice them. And when someone is pushing back against your boundaries, keep repeating the same line. And that's a really effective strategy for shutting things down. So next slide.
And now we want to talk about just some other strategies for participation. If you want to go to the next slide.
Yeah, so again, really trying to make things successful, talk in advance about who's going to plate the meal. There's you can be at different stages and phases in this, and maybe it's not you as the parent, maybe it's someone else. You figured that out in advance. Scope out and strategize those eating arrangements. A crowded table with a lot of talk and everything going back and forth and feeling like eyes on you, all eyes are on you. It's a really stressful situation. So maybe you decide that you want to eat outside, have a little fresh air during that. Again, those safe conversation topics are really important. And I really appreciate what Maris said when we're communicating with our families, and we'll share some resources in the follow-up to this to facilitate those conversations. It's super helpful to give people not just the don't do list, but the do list. So talk about, they can come prepared to talk about things that have been happening in their life, that sort of thing. I talked to a mom once who had a daughter in treatment, and she sort of had this thing where she kind of wouldn't tell her anything on their weeknight calls, so that when she saw on the weekend, all the sort of family gossip would be saved up and it'd be fresh conversation. That invaluable point person outside the family usually is super helpful. Sometimes one of your hostesses or hosts, that kind of thing. And then again, those private conversations, it can be really hard to contemplate telling someone in your family, particularly if it's your own mother or father, that kind of thing, what they should or shouldn't say and that sort of thing. And so just think about those conversations and feel empowered to have them. You're protecting someone's health, and those conversations a lot of times, just as you have navigated having an eating disorder, you realize aren't really the most healthy conversations for any of us. So sometimes this is actually really an opportunity to change the dialogue completely. All right, next slide, please.
I also want to plant the seed that, maybe you're in a place where you want to try and really use this holiday for growth. Maybe you're in a place where that feels really supportive. So it'll be really helpful to, again, plan and prepare ahead of time for things like challenge foods. There could be a variety of ways you do this, and I encourage you to work with your treatment team or your support system on this, but you can even start by envisioning yourself eating these challenge foods. You can start on, visualizing it going well. You can plan ahead for what skills you'll use. You can plan ahead to have a point person who will sit with you while you eat that particular food. So if that's something that you're planning on tackling this year, definitely plan in advance to give yourself some, a great foundation for success. We also think it's helpful to calibrate the overall stress of the celebration. So let's say you happen to know that the people you'll be spending this holiday with are super supportive. They've done a ton of education on eating disorders. They know how to help you create this low stress environment. Maybe you'll choose some higher caliber challenges to tackle. If on the other hand, you know that some people that you'll be spending this holiday with maybe are less educated on eating disorders, maybe some stressful conversation topics might arise, maybe then you'll choose some smaller things to tackle if that feels better to you. But just take a moment to really assess the situation and to decide what you feel comfortable tackling. It's also really helpful to share some of these key goals with your support circle and actually equip them with some ways that they can show up for you. So being really clear on, hey, when I do X, Y, Z, it'd be really helpful if you sat with me and talked with me to distract me. Or, hey, actually, I want to do this and I could use some accountability around it. So it'd be really helpful if you checked in with me about this during the celebration. It's also helpful to maybe keep some notes on your phone, or maybe just like a note on a piece of paper in your pocket with some strategies or skills that you've thought about beforehand. So even quick reminders like distract or delay, just quick things that you have that will be a quick reference for you, can make it so that when you're in the moment with everything going on, all the people, all the noise, you have something quiet to turn into. I think it's also always helpful to say, give yourself permission to go to skills early instead of trying to tough it out. So especially if you're working on some particular challenges this year, there is no shame in doing it a little bit differently. So yeah, you might need to do something like bring some headphones to distract for a little bit, or maybe you need to work with someone to take a moment outside before or after something that's challenging. You don't have to tough it out and do something that maybe looks more like the person next to you at the dinner table. And then finally, this is a great chance to reflect and really learn. So if there's previous holidays where you've challenged yourself, reflect on some learnings from that, or maybe take this as a moment to reflect on what future holidays might look like. When you find that you're in challenging moments, remember what you're doing this for and where all this effort is directed towards. You can go to the next slide.
So we want to wrap up with some closing thoughts for some happier holidays. That's interesting. That slide. Oh, that was interesting. Yeah. So first of all, there's no one right way to do this. There's your way and the way your family is doing it. And I think that's a really important point for us to really put a pin in, because we know that for many eating disorders, there's a huge perfectionism portion of that. We know that that's for a lot of people temperamentally part of things, and often runs in families and things like that. So it's going to be imperfect. All holidays always are. And in fact, the stress level of trying to build holidays to perfection adds its own layer of stress to things. So one of the ways as you navigate through this, I really like to tell families that we had a very strong functional family, happy functional family before this happened to us. And we're even more so now. And we are more so for the experiences that we had, for the work of doing this, for letting go some of those things. So have an imperfect holiday, because that's the way life is and supposed to be. And also to orient people to really keep in mind that some of the best growth may feel like a mistake at times. You may plan on a party, you may think it's going to be great, you may get there, and then it all sort of goes, south, and you're left wondering, why did I ever do this thing? 24 hours later, you may feel really different about it. Going back to Maris's point about growth and reflection, right? There's a lot of learnings we can take for when things don't go well. And in fact, for most of us, if we're really super honest about our times of greatest growth as people and as families, they were the hard times, not the easy times. So trying not to be too scared or put too much pressure on yourself if things don't go well. And then just remembering now is not forever. This is 1 year. And so whatever adaptations you have to make for this year, they're all in the service of next year looking different, as that year will look from the year after that. So really want to leave you with that thought. If you want to advance the slide. So we're wishing you a safe and happy holiday season from Team Equip, and really orienting again to whatever that means for your family in terms of the celebrations that take place over the next 5 or 6 months of the year.
And now we're happy to transition over into our Q&A.
Thank you, JD and Maris, so much. That was incredible information. I, yes, would love to invite everybody to kind of soak in the information and chat your questions, and I'll deliver them to our speakers. I do already have a couple questions, so we'll get started. I'd love to kind of ask both of you to respond so we can really get both aspects. Our audience is broad, and just thinking about all the various ways that we can experience the holidays, whether we're an individual, a caregiver, and sometimes we're also a parent who has our own history, and is trying to navigate the family dynamic of recovery and what all the different ways that this can look. So I do have the first question, is really highlighting some of the struggles that the eating disorder field has kind of year round, but I think especially during the holidays, which is access to care and to like the right level of treatment that somebody might be needing, and then being put on a waiting list maybe. So kind of even being anticipating, you know, what support am I going to get during the holiday season, knowing that I really do need a lot more support right now. So do you have, either of you, just words of encouragement or ideas and thoughts about being in this kind of doubly difficult situation?
Yeah, I can throw some ideas out there, and then I'm really curious to hear your thoughts, JD. And I might actually be stealing your words, JD, in what comes to mind, which is you don't have to know where you're going to start making progress. And so I think even if you haven't begun treatment yet, or you haven't been able to access treatment yet, and you're waiting for that wait list to go down, there's some things you can probably already start doing, like taking stock of what feels like an appropriate fit for this year. That's probably a decision you can make as a gut check within your own family. Maybe, you know, considering what's probably top priority, things like making sure that you're working towards more adequate nutrition for your loved one. So I think there are some changes that you can start to make, even if you don't know exactly what the guidance will be from your clinical team just yet. I think also, you know, a lot of what we talk about is distress tolerance. So I think it's good to prepare, you know, there likely is some distress coming up, and that doesn't mean we have to resolve the distress or make the object of distress go away. We just have to learn or try to practice some ways that help us get through that without making the situation worse. And that can show up a variety of different ways. It could be as simple as finding some ways to take some moments of peace and distract yourself, scroll through your phone, watch a funny TV show, something that's engaging, and to maybe brainstorm some ideas within your support community to do that. And the final idea I'll throw out there is I know a lot of really wonderful nonprofits and community organizations do things like virtual meal support, some Instagram lives, times where you can share a meal with someone else. So a search or a Google search for those ideas or resources might be a helpful place to start.
Yeah, it's this is such a huge issue, and I love that Maris brought up the various things that are coming that we're hearing about popping up in terms of communities providing that someone to have a meal with you is just really helpful and really validating as to the struggle it is. And I also want to really honor the fact that this continues to be, we're still in a pandemic. Resources are still stretched very, very thin. Waiting lists are longer than they ever have been. And so that experience is very, very real for people. And I would say in a situation where you don't, you know, you're on a waiting list for the access to care, that sort of stuff, you're really kind of in a place where you want to maintain the status quo and move forward some if you can. And your biggest thing is not to have decline. And so again, that's going to kind of go back to that tree about what do I do this year? What's the environment that I can plan for myself and my family that's going to enable some forward movement or at least no further decline? And, you know, going back to the bigger conversation, that's probably not a bunch of big gatherings that have a lot of food and drink involved. And it's going to probably necessitate staying away from some people who discuss triggering topics, who discuss have a lot of weight and body image talk and all that sort of thing. And to Maris's point on treatment, you know, definitely, you know, the resources that have providers to refer to and those sorts of things are really helpful. And you know, for families, there are, while you're waiting, there are some really helpful online communities. Sabrina, you mentioned Feast, which is Families Empowered in Supporting Treatment of Eating Disorders. And their Around the Dinner Table forum on either Facebook or in the forum is a really great place to go for that sort of stuff right now. And also, you could contact Equip because we might have space for you depending on your situation.
I was going to add something to that too, that that though the field, we definitely know that there are more people struggling and more families needing support and understanding what struggling with an eating disorder is like and how different it can look. There isn't just one way that somebody and one family experiences this. So there are a lot of newer utilizing the evidence base that we have in the research we have, also expanding into other ways that are more accessible and just different to reach out for those to have ways of treatment. And at the foundation, we're not doing any clinical work, but are certainly part of that community connection. So we have holiday support groups where people can drop in, especially we kind of add a few different ones during the week, during the holiday time. And for family and friends to kind of also be able to sit with and say like, all right, what are the ways, that we can challenge and grow from this? How could I possibly let go of some of the expectations that maybe are traditions in our family that we associate with the holidays? So there's lots of community support to offer as well.
And the good side of the pandemic would be the online resources, and in terms of how your organization has grown by being able to provide things online. I think that's true, and so that is the silver lining of the pandemic.
Agreed. So our next question is really, really about what can we do in the moment. So as an example, where sometimes, regardless of the intention of the comment, we receive comments about our body. It's normal for our bodies to change, and maybe in a year, but in particular, if somebody's been in recovery and their body has changed and we're, in an environment where we haven't seen these, it could be family, friends, we haven't seen these people in an extended amount of time. And so we're coming back together, and it's almost like it's so tough. I don't want to blame people, right? Because it's like, it's an engraved part in our society to like comment on each other's bodies. And there's so much work to be done around this. So whether it's a positive comment, negative comment, any comment about, hey, I'm noticing your body and I'm going to make a comment about it. In the moment, how can we as an individual, how can we deal with that situation? How can we respond? How can we prepare now, to if that's going to happen? Kind of brainstorm what we might do.
I love that you planted this seed for, compassion, that diet culture is the water we're all swimming in. And so we can hold that, room for compassion for the folks in our lives who we anticipate might make those comments. I think the other side of that too is we know it's likely to happen, right? I would say for a majority of families, it's almost more likely than not that someone will make some kind of comment about your body or your appearance. So I'd say that's an excellent thing to cope ahead for and prepare some responses that you're comfortable delivering. And maybe you can, take some time to reflect on, is this a family member who you think might be open to a more in-depth conversation about it? And for whatever reason, your holiday gathering feels like an appropriate space for that, maybe you will say a little bit more like, I am in recovery and it's not helpful for me to hear those things about my body. That feels like context that's helpful for you, then that might be something to consider. I think it's also an option to consider less information, right? Just, quickly changing the topic, maybe quickly moving past the comment, maybe saying something with a bit less context, like, I'd appreciate if you didn't make comments about my body, but not mentioning anything about recovery. I think too, there's some possible space for irreverence depending on who you are, if there's a way to use humor about it. And Dady, I think you have an example about this, if you want to share it about what you say.
Yeah. So, again, I love that diet culture is the ocean we swim in the society. And also, once you've experienced an eating disorder, I think personally or in your family, you can't really do that anymore. It's just, you just can't tolerate it. And I certainly was that way. So when my daughter was better and I started to rejoin society, when I went to my first, happy hour with friends I hadn't seen in, a very, very long time. And people started walking in and there started to be the talk of, oh, I'm so bad, I shouldn't get that, all of that kind of stuff. It created a very visceral reaction in my body. And also they were my friends and I loved them, right? And so the way I reacted was I just said, hey, I'm a no body shame, no diet talk zone. Should I leave or can we change the subject? Because not only is this annoying, it's super boring. And everyone was shocked for a minute. And then they were like, well, of course we can do this. You're our friend. And it's been transformative among my peer group. They now do it to other people. So that's been really helpful. And it was the irreverence. So I wasn't sort of judging them or shaming them, but I was putting my boundary up, but doing it in a lighthearted way. That can be really helpful. And I was also thinking about a gathering that I went to just before the election with some friends who had a purple group of friends, right? And so they had before you got to their house, they had one of those chalkboards, and it said, at this gathering, no political talk, no whatever. So I think that, if you know you're going to be in a situation like that, again, that's that advanced planning that maybe you can get the host or hosts to do something like that. And then I think having some of your skills, like if you hear a comment like that, what are you going to do? Are you going to excuse yourself and go to the bathroom and do some deep breathing exercises? Are you going to go to the bathroom and text a friend and say, I can't believe this happened. Can you believe this happened? Right? Like, so, whatever it is. And again, that freedom to decide, this isn't the place for me right now. I thought maybe it was okay, and it turns out it's not. And I'm allowed to feign a headache and say that I'm leaving now, and talk on Bluetooth to someone on the way home. So prioritize yourself and your recovery. Really, that's and your family's recovery. That's my ultimate advice on that.
Thank you both for your responses there. So I have another question, which is really incredible, because we've been talking about being in a family environment, maybe going home to the family, or maybe we live in the same area. Can we touch a bit on individuals who might really be in a place, really in any place in eating disorder experience and recovery, but might be by themselves for the holiday? What advice do you have to kind of prepare, as we're talking about preparing, and just insight there?
Yeah, this is such a good question. I think the interesting thing about eating disorders is they can interact interestingly with being alone, right? And so sometimes that can be a challenging space to be in, where perhaps the holiday season is a stressful time for you, or something else in the context of your life is stressful. And that could be a time where being alone with the eating disorder voice being really, really loud could be potentially challenging. So that might be something to plan ahead for. So maybe prepare some distractions that you enjoy doing alone, like knitting or some engaging movie marathon you really will get engrossed in, or perhaps if you would like to connect with people virtually, if you're isolating for any reason due to the pandemic, maybe plan some kind of FaceTime holiday get together that's not food related. So I think, again, planning ahead here is key, and just planning some things that keep you engaged and perhaps a little bit distracted in case the eating disorder voice tries to be really loud.
Yeah, and I think that is, sort of loneliness at the holidays is a really huge issue for people in and out of the eating disorder space. There's just so much pressure put on the holidays to be magical, and it's often not magical. And I think if we sort of all accepted that every year isn't magic, every holiday isn't magic, that would be, people wouldn't feel so much like, oh, the rest of the world is having a great time and I'm over here alone and that kind of stuff. So like really remembering as well that the Instagram reel is everyone's highlight reel. And I can tell you personally, from not having spent holidays alone, because I have 4 kids and a pretty big family, some of those super happy pictures were preceded by me threatening everyone to within an inch of their life if they didn't smile appropriately for the camera, right? So remembering a little bit that a lot of us are stressed at that time of year. A lot of us have negative associations with those sorts of things. And, I really love what Mara said. And if you can, figure out a way to really just treat yourself to all of the stuff that you love that day. I think about one of the holiday traditions that I would like to adopt in my family is apparently, and I believe this is either Finland or Iceland, where they get books and chocolate on Christmas Eve, and then that's what they do. Like for that whole day, everyone just goes to their own room and is in their bed with their books and their chocolate. Chocolate, not necessarily the best thing for, everybody at their place in eating disorder recovery, but replace that sort of with your, essential oils or something like that, your diffuser going. And figuring out what really fills you up and do that on that day.
So the next question is really interesting and something that I honestly, I'll admit, haven't thought about before, which is beyond the holidays, which is thinking about now. So the question is, have you both considered, or does Equip have any thoughts on this already, with kind of the value of looking past the holidays right now? Because it really is kind of like we do all get impacted by the stress. We do carry the stress, whatever that looks like for us individually. And it's sort of like this build up, build up, build up. And then I don't know, right. Sometimes maybe it feels like a relief, but really wondering, what do we think about to January and February? Just thoughts on that.
I think what comes to mind is not losing the forest for the trees. So overall, not losing your main treatment goals just because maybe some holiday events are coming up. So let's say your family is really working on weight restoration. Think ahead to where you want to be in January, February in terms of progress there, and think, okay, we're still going to have to stay on track with things like meeting our nutrition prescription and making sure that we're not overdoing it with movement or exercise, or staying to what our treatment team has recommended. So I wouldn't lose sight of what our main treatment objectives are, and maybe lose that in the shuffle of holiday gatherings. I think too, there's many things that come post the holiday season culturally that are very normative, but I would say are harmful. So it's very common for everybody to start talking about their diet in January, or to talk about making up for all the indulgence at all the holiday parties. So I think those are all things you could cope ahead for, and really prepare how you're going to navigate those challenges as they arise.
Yeah, that is so powerful and so impactful, and I think potentially related would be one of the reasons we had this rise in eating disorders during the pandemic, with a lot of the talk around that weight gain and stuff initially, I think has impacted that. And January certainly is that time of year. I think one of the things that could be helpful maybe is spending some time in that last part of the year, if you haven't already done that, curating your social media feeds if you're on social media. So setting up those algorithms to not show you all that stuff you don't want to see, and start showing you, I mean, again, social media, like everything, a double-edged sword, and there are so many amazing people out there talking about this, really unpacking the work, inviting people to think about things in new ways. And it's a really good time, as January, it has that fresh start sort of thing to it, right? New year, new you kind of thing. And what the new you can take the diet culture language out of that, and maybe the new you is someone who's really in tune with your values that have nothing to do with body size or food intake or exercise, and pick up those pieces and really run with that. What do you want 2022 to look like for you? So, set the recovery goals as well, and set some other goals in there too. And really begin to achieve those, and things that really make you feel very good about who you are as a person. And going back to, as we've, a couple of those threads talked about volunteering and things like that. And so, as much as you can sometimes get outside of yourself and begin to do those things can be really helpful in having that new year that's more aligned with who you truly are as your authentic self, and not what the eating disorder wants you to be.
Thank you both so much. I just would like to take a few moments to close with a reminder that we have another workshop coming up in December. This one more geared towards caregivers, mental health and parenthood, how to support yourself while supporting your loved one in recovery. So for the caregivers who are joining us tonight, keep that in mind, to kind of, allow this evening's workshop and all the amazing information provided to settle, and then come back, right? And I think both of you mentioned, like, this is done imperfectly. This is done over time and in many different ways. So leaving space for that as well. And just to, as I've been looking at the comments and the questions, and lots, Maris and JD say, lots of like, yes, exclamations, understanding, and thank yous. So I want to make sure you hear that. That, so much of this is like, okay, having the conversation now, preparation, and then knowing that there is a community to still come and find and collaborate with and talk with, as things will happen imperfectly. So we just have a few minutes left. I would love to just allow you both to maybe share final thoughts that have been helpful to you and your experiences. And again, lastly, thank you for your time and your expertise, your personal experience and expertise.
Well, thank you so much for facilitating this and putting it together. And I would say the final words that come to mind for me are just not letting perfect be the enemy of the good. So whatever happens this year, if you did your best, tried your best at planning, maybe the plans didn't go through, that's all you can do. And it's all working towards, the next year and the year after.
Yeah. And I would say, meet yourself where you are this year, as a family, meet your family where you are, as a person, meet yourself where you are, move forward from there. And really, for those people, and I want to differentiate because there's different groups of people across the spectrum, and I'm sort of speaking now to, sort of families. EQIP treats patients from 6 to 26 right now. Full recovery is absolutely possible. And so if this year is really hard for you in whatever way that is, rest assured, Maris and I are both here to tell you that you can get to a place where the joy that maybe you used to have or never had, right, can be part of that, where you can define this the way you want it to be and define yourself the way you want to be. So really putting in a plug for that full, robust recovery, which absolutely is a thing that I consider to be achievable and is a beautiful thing to see. And thank you so much, Sabrina, for having us.
Truly, thank you. And one final reminder, all of this has been recorded, so we'll be sure to make sure everybody gets this within the next couple of days, so you can come back to it and remind yourself of all these wonderful opportunities of empowerment, and a reminder of happy imperfect holidays. I love that. I think this is how I'm going to address people as I'm sharing the rest of this season. So thank you both.